Hey, everybody. Leslie, welcome to the podcast. First and
Here.
foremost, we are really, really glad to be here. I have Leslie Venetz here today. Leslie, I don't even think I would do it justice of telling about your background, your story, and the amazing things that you're doing today. So I actually want to hand it over to you is like, give us a little introduction about yourself, but even more, and what I'm very curious about is like, how did you get into sales? How did you get here? Because everybody always has such a unique story. So I want to hear it.
For sure. So we were talking before we went live that I'm in this brand builders group. And the thing I was working on last week was my bio for the book. And so the bio's like Leslie Venetz, top 1%, like most highly sought out. Like, I mean, it's how you're supposed to write them, but it is like deeply, deeply braggadocious. The real meat and potatoes of it is that I spent 15 years in corporate America, like smashed the phones as an IC, spent a ton of time in player coach roles, both as like number one employee at a startup. I would never make that decision again. And a ton of time in sales leadership, then left corporate 3 years ago to bet on myself. So I've been a full time founder since then, like mostly dabbling in the top of funnel, like prospecting to discovery call stuff because I just eat that up. That and sales soft skills, which I'm sure we will talk about at some point. How did I know? I don't think I have a unique story of how I got into sales. I think it's the most common story ever, which is never did I ever think I would be a seller. And then I got a sales job and was like, I'm quite good at this. And there is a lot of money to be made. And here I am almost 20 years later.
I love that. So I'm curious, real quick, because you are passionate about sales and getting into sales, what was like the first eye opener that you had getting into sales?
Oh my gosh, the first eye opener, twofold. I think the first positive eye opener where I was like, oh, this is much different than I thought it was, is when I realized that like what made me really good, better than other people at sales was like a desire to help people, like a natural curiosity. And those were not skills that I thought were quote unquote sales skills. Like I would never put that on my CV. So that was a positive surprise. And I would say a negative surprise was just like the culture. The first job I had was super toxic culture. And I had like just moved from small town Montana and it was my first like corporate job. And I was in Chicago in the big city and was just like, I mean, I guess this is just how it is. I suppose this is what it's like to work in sales and work in corporate America. And there were some dicey times. So it was a positive and a negative. Like I was jazzed to know that some of the like core skills or core characteristics I brought to the table actually made me really, really good at sales when I thought those would make me not good at sales. But I was trying to incorporate those skills in what was a kind of hostile environment.
I love that. I, there's so many good ones, right? So like similar to yours, I actually my first sales job, I sold newspapers at like 8 years old. That's when I
You
was
like
hooked in
proudly toss
sales.
them on the porch?
No, so I actually went door to door selling the subscription so they could have the paper boy come and throw them at their doorstep. So it was the first, like, yeah, true, B2C door to door sales. That was at a younger age. It was fun. I was cute. So, like, I did great. Never really, like, fell into, like, the
Child labor.
challenges. Exactly. Yeah, kind of. But in college, I actually got an internship. And of course, it was like this glorified message of like what it was broken down. It was door to door B2B sales. And I mean like the old school where like we'd meet at the office, we'd get in a bus and they would give me a map. Here's your map. They taught us the postal office like always on the left so that way you don't miss anything. Man, that was the hardest job I've ever done. And I think what got me hooked at that point though in sales was learning that sales is psychology, right? Like once you actually like understand the foundation of sales, after that it's all psychology. And I'm so intrigued how the human brain works. Ever since then, I was like, I'm hooked. Like I want to understand, like I can say this one thing differently and it actually has like amazing impact. I'm sure my wife would probably tell you she wishes we would bring it into our relationship more, but it was something that I learned in my career, implemented every single time. But on you, what was it that made you like, you've been this very transformative, refreshing voice of like reshaping sales to really being that buyer centric, inclusive, and kind of respected area. So today we're going to dive into how AI intersects with those. But like, what was it that made you really understand or want to dig deeper into like being more buyer centric from a sales methodology perspective?
Oh my gosh, it was not one thing. It was so many things. And I think it started in that very first job where everybody was selling in one way. And don't get me wrong, like it worked, but it was super high pressure, like control the conversation at all costs, some sort of like emotional manipulation. And it worked. Those things got people to buy. They felt icky though. I started testing some other ways to get people to engage and get people to close, and those also worked. And it made me start asking the question, like, what the heck is going on in these people's brains and minds and hearts that get them to react to all of these different sort of buying principles or like behavioral psychology principles in different ways. So I think very early on, like that interest or just being like super curious about why different buyers respond in different ways on different channels to different types of messaging. But I would say what really changed was, I don't know, maybe this was like 8 years ago. I joined a like bootstrapped early stage startup as their first hire. And so, as you know, in the startup world, I was marketing and I was sales and I was operations and I was CS. I was wearing all of the hats and doing all of the things. And despite having gotten a marketing degree, I'd never really used my marketing degree. So I was like a decade into my career and trying to marry learning how to send marketing messaging with what I knew worked in sales messaging and exploring the differences between like lead gen and demand gen. And ultimately, like realizing that what I found worked best was marrying marketing and sales concepts, like marrying some of the demand gen or at least blurring the lines between demand gen and lead gen. And that like skyrocketed my interest in the behavioral psychology that motivates our buyers. And then when I got really into like cold outbound sales messaging, because so much of it is just like not intuitive at all. It was not one thing, it was so many things, but they're all like it's so compelling to kind of look behind the curtains and understand why things work and how you can make them better.
I love that. It's spot on too, right? I mean, especially with how this landscape is drastically changing, it is becoming very buyer centric. And if you're not evolving to meet your customers where your customers are at, you're gonna have a very hard time, right? And I think like a couple of years ago, we were able to get by with it, and I think it's just because everything was so new. So we could have this like acquisition mentality where you hit a good point now where it's like we got to make sure we're meeting them. Are they in the awareness stage? Are they in the consideration stage? And so even more simpler than that, I think you hit a good point of like, how do we combine what you learn in sales with what you learn in marketing? Because we've all been there. Nobody ever uses marketing's messaging because 9 times out of 10, it's very marketing jargon and sales looks at it like, I would never say that. But then there's the other problem, which is, and I think it's more of a problem in tech, is like we have this inside out focus, which is like this feature does this versus an outside in of here's the value you need, here's the benefits, and here's the features that help deliver that benefit and those values. And so the way that I've gone about, really simplifying it and thinking through it is it's like an hourglass, right? From a sales side going up, it's about pain, benefit, and value. Then when you inverse that, it's about value, benefit, and then what features. And it's actually when you combine those two, it's kind of how our discovery process works when you do it right as well, right? And so I love that you got deep into this. So naturally, I'm leading the witness, right? This naturally led into the Sales-Led GTM, the go-to-market agency.
Yeah,
Um,
wait,
tell me-
before we move on, I want to stay on that point you just made because it is like one of the biggest things I think people get wrong with sales messaging or with their outreach, and so it's like very worth repeating. I was actually just earlier today. I was on a SCO with one of my favorite clients, this like big Canadian SaaS company, and we were doing a sales messaging workshop, and I stole a very, very old marketing concept and I iterated it and now I use it to teach sales messaging. But do you remember like AIDA, like attention,
Hmm.
interest? Yeah, right. Right. Attention,
Yep.
interest, and action. Yeah. From ages ago. And there was a concept nestled underneath that called FABs, features, advantages, benefits. Right.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. We probably got that a little bit earlier in our career. So I took FABs and now I teach it as like features are where 80% of emails stop. That's like what you just described, right? Like our feature does, we have offices in this feature, blah, blah, blah. Maybe 15% of them go on to talk about the advantage of that feature, like why it actually matters, but they almost all sound like we'll save you money, we'll save you time, we'll make you money, we'll reduce risk. It's all the same set of generic advantages. Maybe 5% might be generous, of sales emails or sales messaging go to that benefit. Like, what is the problem that is being solved that is actually relevant and actually matters to them? So I think it's worth just taking a moment to pause on, because the bar for writing sales messaging is like in hell. So it's,
Hmm.
bad news, it's very low. Good news, it's not that hard to step over if you listen to this type of advice where you're like, why is the buyer going to find it compelling? How do I do that by focusing on the problem or focusing on the pain point?
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. We were talking about plan selling, right? What I'm working on. And very similar to that, I call it smart prospecting, which is show me you know me, right? The personalization piece. And then it's very straightforward. Map the facts, acknowledge the cracks, reveal the impact, and then take action, right? What
Mm,
is that call to action? Because nothing is worse when the call to action is like, can we chat for 15 minutes? And it's like, dude, this is the first email I've gotten from you,
yeah,
like, or thoughts, right? Like, and so I agree with you. Like, I think it's one of the things that is probably, I would say it's the foundation. It's not even a cornerstone. It is the foundation of sales, because you could get your ICP perfected. You could have good positioning. But if your messaging does not resonate, it doesn't matter how much money you put in marketing. It doesn't matter how many salespeople you hire. You're not going to connect with your customers. And so I think it's a good call out to pause, because it is probably the most important thing to get right.
yeah. You said we're going to talk about AI. Are we going to talk about signals?
Oh, we can bucket that under. So like, high level, right? And we'll dig into it. But like, how do you see AI playing a role in supporting those modern sales strategies and actually making them more effective?
Well,
Is it
signal.
signals?
Yeah, I mean, like that's like one of my, okay, there are a couple things. Obviously, just the amount of time saving ability that AI, like we constantly complain about how much time we're spending on non-sales activities, like just the opportunity to reclaim that time so we can use it to be more thoughtful and strategic in our approach. I love it. Like something that you said made me think of connecting the dots, like in your smart selling, maybe it was the R. What was the R?
Reveal the impact.
Yeah, reveal the
It
impact.
is acknowledge the crack, or map the facts,
Totally.
acknowledge the crack, reveal the
Yes.
impact. You're connecting the dots all there.
Yes, like how can you
Yeah.
connect the dots to make sure that you are making it super relevant to them? And I think with some of that time we are buying back using AI as an assistive tech, like we can be more strategic and thoughtful in connecting the dots. One of them is AI role play. I think that's like, I'm so, so, so excited about predictive AI role play. Like there's a company called Luster whose tech is, I'm like, that is fire. But for signals, that's one of my favorite things that I hope we'll see a lot more of in 2025, because it's a chance to preemptively connect the dots. Like you can map out your firmographic data. I know that if this type of account for like, revenue, location, employee count, industry, sub-industry, etc., has these two trigger events happen, and maybe one of them is like got a new CFO in the last year, and then the second one is have a job posted in IT, that they're very likely to be open to considering purchasing my tech because I anticipate they have this type of problem they're trying to solve for. And being able to like preemptively connect those dots to come with a point of view and to make a really educated assumption on this being the right time to help this particular prospect. That's cool. And we literally did not have the technology to be able to do that just a few years ago, or at least do it this seamless.
No, I agree. And so, do you think AI is going to play the role in capturing those signals or helping with the messaging based off those signals?
Hard to say, Heath. I don't know. I mean, like capturing, sure. I say that, like, I mean, it is capturing it, but what I'm seeing for the most part right now is that it's just giving people like a huge list of signals, but it's not making the assumptions. And like it certainly isn't coming with the point of view. So I think it is a great way to like collate the data, to collate the signals and bring them to the surface. But I've not seen any technology that I think is doing an exceptional job at like really helping the seller connect the dots. I think that's still something that like sellers and sales leadership need to do, is understand what the signals mean, what that impact is. So like maybe, and yeah, I do think that there is some applicability in helping write the sales messaging, but I have looked at all of the tech. Like, I don't think there's a tech that writes sales messaging that I haven't tested that's like at product market fit or beyond that I would trust to send my sales emails without editing. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. I think like AI is great for like drafts, right? I still think we're very far away. I think even if it was perfect, I can't believe this just happened. Hold on. Let me just switch over to my other camera.
Okay.
All right. Where were we when we left
You
off?
were answering the question. I had just said that I had not seen any technology that I think is good enough to send an email without editing, and then you were saying I agree.
Yes, I agree. I think like with the drafts of messages, what we were talking about. I think even if AI, right? You talk about the adoption curve, right? We are definitely in the early adopters. So even if it was perfect, I just don't think that society's at a place to be able to accept that yet. I do think down the road we'll have opportunities to like automate some things with AI, but I think like the moral of it is that AI is going to help enable reps to do better, perform better. I don't see it as any tool that's going to replace reps. I know there's a lot of people that think that it is, but I think we're far, far, far away from that. And so I'm curious, right? Like going into the signals, and you hit a really good point about signal stacking, is what I call it. So we track a lot of signals over here. We actually use Common Room at Mixmax. So we mix product signals, firmographic, website. But like one of the things I've seen it done wrong today is where it's like, oh, they came to our website. Let me go and talk to them. And it's like you really don't know where they're at. And so signal stacking for me is taking that firmographic. For example, what we look at, if somebody comes to our website, we care more. I look at, did they go to 3 or more pages on our website? Because that shows me you're doing your homework. Then, did they actually look at our pricing page? Then we'll actually look at, is there different content they've been looking at? Is there different competitor pages that they're looking at? To your point, when you can stack those, it creates an actual motion, a message behind it in a way that we can actually go and have the right conversation. I think the other next step behind signals is coaching reps that like, please don't message someone like, hey, Leslie, I saw you're on my website. Want to buy? It's going to be so bad.
I saw you visited my website for 32 seconds at 4:08 a.m. Not sleeping well. No, so it's so true. I think of signals in 3 buckets, and one are the signals that we know probably mean that they have a problem to solve, but they might not even know it yet. The signals that tell me that they realize they have a problem and they're trying to figure out how to solve it. They're sort of in that exploratory educational phase. And then those later stage signals, which are like, visited my pricing page 7 times in the last 48 hours, like pick up the phone and call that person. So I think a huge mistake that we make is confusing later stage signals with early stage signals, meaning like somebody downloaded a white paper and sales leadership or marketing leadership is like, call this person, they're ready to go. And you're like, no, they aren't. Like, first of all, they're a coordinator. Second of all, they only downloaded a white paper. Like that does not tell me that they're the right person to prioritize in our outreach.
Exactly. And so I'm curious, you talked about efficiency and effectiveness, right? And how it can unlock that in reps. And so you hit a good one, signals very early in the stage in the funnel. You also talked about the coaching. very great for prepping reps. And so I'm curious from your perspective, knowing the in-depth understanding you have across the sales funnel and what it takes, where else do you think that AI is going to be most critical in actually making reps more productive and helping them be more efficient?
Mm, I don't know if it's exactly being more efficient with their time, but one of my hot takes is that active listening is actually the most important and most foundational skill for any seller. So when we think about applications of AI and being able to use conversational intelligence bots, I think that freeing up the mental space, like the mental bandwidth that folks previously have like tried to use to remember the thing that they're going to say next or remember the questions or what they promised to do, and instead offloading that to a conversational intelligence bot who is capturing everything and then is able to create like super tight summaries. Like the one that I use can create emails. Like I have a couple of different prompts in there and I can just choose which one and an email is created immediately. Yes, I still have to maybe edit it slightly, but I am sort of obsessed with my conversational intelligence bot for that reason. Like I can go into a call and be like, what do you think the vibe of the call was? Just to like sense check if I had happy ears. I can figure out how many questions I asked. I love, love, love. And I know this isn't the newest use of AI, but I'm still surprised how many teams either don't use a conversational intelligence bot or like don't really use it as a partner in the sales process. So that is one that I think has tremendous potential to help sellers be better active listeners, which is such an incredibly important sales skill and will also help them save time.
That is money. First off, I couldn't agree with you more, seriously, because active listening is the most important thing. I myself am guilty of it, right? When I get on client calls before conversational intelligence came out, I was more focused on making sure that I'm getting the right notes. And of course, I'm sure you've done this, everybody's done it. I created my way of note taking to where I didn't have to write too much, but I knew exactly like what the common themes were. And I love now with CI, like I can actually get into a call. I can focus on the person. I can focus on the relationship. I can actually pay attention to their reactions. I think that's one thing that has actually been missed out on and was the fun part of in-person sales is like you could see the body language, you could see the reactions. And I think now there's so many distractions on a Zoom call. I think CI is really helping solve that problem. So I think it's a really good point. I'm curious, right? Because you work with so many sales leaders. I'm going to switch a little bit from like the IC to the sales leader. What are some of the key areas that you're talking to them about that they should focus on when it comes to actually like enabling their teams? Is it around those actual areas that we talked about, or are there other things that people you're talking to today are asking about?
I would say one of the biggest things is understanding the difference between coaching and training, which it doesn't feel like this should still be such a big issue. But I find that very few sales leaders are effective coaches, or at least like more of them are good at training being one to many. They are training the entire group on whatever concept versus coaching, which is one to one. And I know because I've audited many, many processes and built many myself. The gap in understanding is an ability to look at the entire sales process and dig into every little conversion rate. And so very few sales leaders have because most of them haven't actually built the processes themselves. They're sort of coming in as like the arbitrator of the process, have the ability to be like, okay, if we're not getting the results that we want, like if we are not getting enough opportunities opened, why are we not getting enough opportunities, and being able to boil it down enough to be like, oh, we're not getting enough opportunities open because this rep doesn't feel comfortable pushing a second or a third time to set up the next call before the end of the first call because of this reason. I need to really work through role playing that with them and understanding their mindset. Like it requires, I think, a really, really deep understanding of the minutia of the process, and then a willingness to spend one-on-one time with reps, understanding that you can't only train on like the technical skill or the tech. you also often have to overcome mindset barriers and train on soft skills.
We could dig into this one so much because I agree with you. I think I don't like the word managers. I think that a manager manages from the back line, they manage from their desk. A coach is a front line, and they're actually like, I call it like a good leader can show it, then coach it, then hold it accountable, right? But too often we do a decent job of showing it, we don't coach it, but yet we still, where the accountability is there. And I want to double down on that for a second because you can actually combine the two too, right? For sales leaders. And this is the way at least I do trainings and coaching is like, yes, there's always ad hoc coaching. And if you're not doing that, you're not listening to enough phone calls, you're not on enough deals. But what I also do is I know that the forgetting curve is a real thing, right? If I train them once, they're going to forget it by the end of the month. So a lot of times what I've done and I've taught my managers to do is whatever you train on one thing. Because that's the other problem is when you train on too much and you expect someone to take that in action, it's like, good luck. So it's like train on that one thing, but then every week, make sure you have a coaching session that focuses around that one thing to ensure that like we're actually solving that. I think too often we try to boil the ocean and try to fix everything like it's a silver bullet cure versus like just being very micro focused around like, hey, if we solve that one thing, to your point, if I can help that one rep just get more comfortable in setting next steps, right? If I impact their show rate, that's naturally going to impact their win rate because of the compounding
Yep.
effect. But
Yeah.
too often we're like, you're not booking enough meetings and you're not booking enough pipeline and you're not closing enough deals. So like, we're going to train you on all of those things. And I'm just going to throw you an a la carte option to choose from. Right.
Yeah. Yes, 100%, 110% yes. Two follow-ups to that. First, like one of my favorite, when I was managing very large teams or any size of team, one of my favorite things to do was to like almost make training a series. So like this month, all we would focus on is objections. And we'd focus on the mindset of objections and objections on cold calls and like all these different types of objections. So we're really, really deep diving that one particular thing. Because to your point, if we spend like 30 minutes in a morning meeting talking about something, like it is gone. Like they probably didn't even carry it onto the floor, onto the phones. Like it's probably already gone. So that repetition and going deeper instead of wider is like so freaking important. And then there was a second thing. What was the second thing that I was going to say? You were like saying brilliant things, and I was like, oh my God, I agree. The other thing that I was thinking is the value in like micro tasks for reps and then celebrating what might seem like kind of insignificant things. Like some of my favorite ones to do are like just get 10 more cell phone numbers. Right? So instead of being like SDR, you need to be better asking questions and you need to be better at building your prospect and you need to be better at like whatever. You need all of these things. Be like, oh, okay, based on my expertise, because it's my responsibility as a sales leader to have a pretty good guess at where they're going to be able to get gains. I think that if they could just reach 1 to 2 more people a week, that would help with their confidence and it would help give them enough conversations that they could see better rates throughout their funnel. So if they can just ask for cell phones more consistently, later they're going to reach people more often. So my metric would just be get 10 cell phone numbers a week. So it's so like they are doing that one thing. And yes, that one thing supports so many other skills, but it's easy to measure. It's easy for them to accomplish and stay accountable to. And then it's easy for me as the sales leader to celebrate that thing that they accomplished.
Love that. There's so many that I feel like we could do a whole nother session on just coaching. Because you hit a good one. The way I do coaching sessions and role plays, right? We do role plays every single week. So like the way we do it over here at Mixmax is Mondays is like the kickoff day. We do a coaching session. Then we do a power hour right after that. So we do what we call campaign power hours to get them on the phones. It's like just dust off the cobwebs from the weekend and let's get going, team. But you hit a really good point, all right? Bringing it back to AI is like there's this right balance of like AI and human connection. And right, as powerful as AI is, there's that risk of losing that human connection that buyers really crave. And so, where do you think automation should stop and like that human interaction should definitely making sure that like it always is taking over. And the second follow up to that is like, what advice would you give to sales reps who want to leverage AI to improve their day to day performance?
That is such a complicated question. I think AI should continue until the point that it starts adding friction instead of removing friction. So I think that it is not actually about what we as sellers think. I think that this is an opportunity to listen to our buyers and be like, oh, they like it when it's this opportunity to like easily self serve, but then they hate it when they want to talk to a person and there's no person available because we've put in all this friction to make it so that they can't easily speak to a person. So I think that we need to like kind of read the room a little bit. But something I would add to that is that there is so much science on mirror neurons. And even if we are talking into a hyper realistic AI, the mirror neurons in my brain don't trigger, which means I'm not going as your buyer to like want to lean in, to smile when you smile, to feel empathy on the same level. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but it does not happen when we interact with bots the same way it happens when we interact with humans. So I think there's an extraordinarily delicate balance where we will continue to see AI having conversations on our behalf, and there is quite a conversation to be had on like what transparency do we own our buyers when they are talking to or interacting with AI, videos, text, bots instead of humans, and at what point will they demand a human, because at our core we want to feel seen and heard by our peers, by other humans. So can you tell I think about this a little bit? I totally like do not
Just a
stay up
little
at
bit.
night at all thinking about this. That's like not me. So how do I think that how do I think that like individual contributors should react? I think that individual contributors should ask themselves the question, am I doing this because it serves me, or am I doing this because it serves the buyer? And if it does not serve the buyer and it only serves you, that's not, you got to stop.
I completely agree with that. And I love that you're passionate about it, especially knowing that you're influencing like the future companies, the companies that are growing, right? And so I want to get before we wrap up this, right? And so like AI is continuing to evolve. It's not slowing down. The opportunities for sales teams, like it's only going to continue to grow, which is the exciting part. And so I want to wrap up with a couple of forward looking thoughts from you. Like one is like, what excites you the most about the potential of AI? I'm gonna do the cliche like resume. Like what do you see in the next 5 years?
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, like what excites you the most?
It's not applicability in sales, which maybe I was
Okay.
thinking of a sales answer. I think that the really like most insanely exciting applications for AI are probably in the medical field, like early detection of disease or like new ways to help cure people without invasive surgeries, or being able to get down to more like root cause medicine. So that like I think that is the coolest and most exciting way. Like maybe we can create more access to medicine and to the things that will heal people using AI.
I agree with that. There's definitely like so many areas that AI is hasn't even really, what's the word? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. It hasn't even hit like taken off the tip of the iceberg, right?
We have not crossed the chasm.
Yeah, not even close to that. So if I want to put this into next 5 years for sales,
Yeah.
what will AI be for sales organizations and what will it be not?
I don't think it will be it will not replace reps. AI will not replace sales reps, not even in 5 years, not even with all of the gains. I love AI. Don't get me wrong here. I literally have chat open in a tab right now. I think that chat is an incredible thought partner. I use a ton of AI in my workflows. I genuinely, like 2 years into using it, can't imagine life before. Like I can't imagine we just did these things with our brains and our hands. So I am very bullish on the applicability of AI to support us as sellers. I don't buy that the dreams that people have for AI are going to come true. I know that's a bit of a cynic's take, but when I hear people talk about where they think AI going and they're like, oh, it's just going to be able to like replace human thought, like AI can't mimic humans in the way most people think. It's just predicting what is most likely to be said next based on all of the inputs. And that's problematic because they've already used so many of the inputs and we're just now feeding back AI inputs instead of our own human brain inputs. So I think there's like I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think there's going to be diminishing returns on AI. And so I don't feel like in 5 years it is going to have the dramatic impact that people anticipate it having. It will have a great impact. It's already had a great impact, but I don't think that it's going to be, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be as impactful as folks anticipate. That was the least eloquent way I've ever explained anything.
I think I'm gonna summarize real quick because I think you hit a really good point. I think the power of AI is, especially in sales, it's gonna help get that initial conversation.
Yeah.
But I think the real power is going to be how can AI ensure that we keep that conversation going? How does that first meeting turn into the next meeting, turn into the next meeting, and turn into an actual deal? Right? That's where AI can leverage on like deal insights, prospecting insights, signals, conversational intelligence, all of those things that you're hitting on. I do think that, to your point with diminishing returns, once you've really solved for that, productivity is going to be there. My concern is that we're going to misuse that. And like the multiplier we're going to expect from reps is going to go from 4 or 5 to like 7 or 8. I think that's the challenge that we're going to go through. And so, Leslie,
Yeah.
like this has been an awesome conversation.
I have to say two more things that actually
Yeah,
sound like
go
an
ahead.
intelligent human being. Because I am. One thing that I will say about AI that I just want everybody that is listening to this to just like go to the Google and Google or go to your chatbot and Google is a lot of like the ethical debt issues with AI, which is a more broad scope about the inputs going into AI and what it means for the outputs being fed to us. But specific to sales, something that really concerns me, and I think it's related to the sort of diminishing returns from AI, is that all of the inputs that are going into it are based on what we're using right now, and what we're using right now is like what are reps getting for their average quota attainment, like 56%. No, it's lower than that. It was like 43% of reps hit quota in 2024. So like
Yeah.
the processes and the frameworks and the thought and like everything that we're feeding chat right now to teach it what works best is a deeply broken system. Like what we're doing right now isn't working. And so then we are teaching chat what already doesn't work and we're expecting it to extrapolate and in 5 years have this amazing outcome that's going to change sales. And I simply don't buy it.
No, I agree with you. I think right now it's being looked at as the silver bullet. It's not going to be the silver bullet. Nothing ever is. I do think it's a tool that can help you move faster. I can move probably 5 to 10x than I used to be able to move just because I'm way more productive. The things that would take me time of like writing the right, email or taking the right type of notes or even as a leader, like putting projects together, like those things happen so much faster now. And I can only imagine for the reps. And so, Leslie, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like there's like 5 other topics that we can take from here and like keep digging down, but it was really insightful. And so, like, where can our listeners follow your work, learn more about you and about your strategies that you champion?
Yeah, LinkedIn is my primary channel. I post there every single day. So please find me there, follow me, ring my bell. And then my debut solo book is going to drop later this year. So make sure to keep an eye open for updates about that.
Awesome. I cannot wait for that book to come out. I'm definitely going to pre order and I will be the first one to read that. So excited for that to come out. Leslie, thank you so much again for the conversation today. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.